USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Edge, where each week we highlight some games and look at betting lines and discuss why they look that way. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly and Dan Rubin. Gentlemen, this has been fun. I've learned a little bit over the years. I still don't bet on college games. I know we all stay away from that. But before we dive in, let's take a look at what these numbers we're going to talk about really mean. There are two numbers we're going to talk about, plus and minus, and over-under. Let's talk about that plus and minus number we'll talk about.
Yeah, the money line. That is the safest, easiest way to bet on college hockey. If you're a gambler and you're so inclined to make a bet, it's a simple wager. If the number is a plus number, so plus 175, we say plus 175, that means you need to lay down $100. And if the team that you bet on wins, you will win that $100 plus that plus number. So if it's plus 175, you'd win $275 off a $100 wager. Minus goes the opposite way. So if you're minus, let's say you're minus 180, you have to lay $180 to win $100 if that team that if you look at it that way, the plus number is the underdog, the minus number is the favorite. You always get back the value of your original bet. That's the most important thing that people sometimes say, oh, why am I laying $100 to make $175? That seems, you get that $100 back. So when you're laying it to make $175, you're really making $275. Over under bet, not exactly as clean cut. There will be a number that is set by the sports book. Usually somewhere between 5.5 goals and 7 goals is usually the number that you're going to see most often. If you go over that number of goals, so over 5.5 goals, the total goals between the two teams scored is 6 or higher. That would be an over. Under would be anything 5 or less. Sometimes this seems cut and dry, but sometimes not so much. And the amount that is next to that. So it used to be when I first started gambling, minus 105 was always the number. You had to lay $105 to make $100. If you hit your over-under, you would make 100 plus 105. So that would be 205 for every $100 bet, $105 bet. Not that clean and simple anymore. A lot of sports books will give you an over-under and then give you 2 minus numbers. So that means the house is always making money. Over or under minus 125 on the over, minus 105 on the under. So the house is taking their juice right away. And all of these lines come from DraftKings. So I guess I'm not surprised that the house is always taking juice on this, but that's just something to worry about. Like that you're always paying juice to the house on these bets. It seems more complicated than it probably really is. This is simple math, but there will be a lot of math. So if you don't like math, stay out of this business and stay out of these bets. But we'll get into it and you'll hear us throw those numbers around quite often.
Yeah. And just to build on top of that, if you're not a gambler or you don't like math either, the way to look at those numbers, because like I said, we don't bet college hockey games. We just look at the numbers and we talk about the numbers and what they might mean, is if you consider the numbers, the likelihood of something. So if you're a fan of a team that is coming into the game on a winning streak, but you see them at home and they're plus something, that's the sports books identifying that they think your team still might lose based on the factors and what they input into their algorithms. And the likelihood of your team winning and losing, if you think about it like an FPI or a BPI or one of those score-like odds that come out on the percentages on the ESPN, when it says which team has a 93% chance of winning, the more of an underdog your team is, or the more of a favorite dictates how the books and how people who crunch these numbers in computers and put together these things and how we would handicap them is simply how much we think the likelihood of your team winning or losing would be. And then what kind of game you can expect on the over-under. If we're going to say a 5.5 is even too high and we think it's only going to be a 3-2 game or a 2-1 type of game, that kind of gives you the idea of how people who watch this stuff look at the numbers and say, this is the type of game I think you could be in for. And then we could always be wrong. And in most times, if you're listening to me, you'll at least come back the next week and say, you really fanned on that one.
Yeah. The other thing to mention too is that, and this has gotten much more prominent in the last 5 years since sports books have expanded from casinos to any Joe Schmo that wants to run their own sports book. A lot of these numbers that we're going to tell you are generated by artificial intelligence, AI. I feel that does give the gambler, a sharp gambler that knows what they're doing, especially in college hockey, a massive advantage for like the first 4 weekends. And then the AI starts correcting itself and getting things right. You will see a lot of lines that are way crazy numbers, plus 550 in week 1 or week 2 of the regular season. That team ends up pulling off the upset, makes that money. If you bet it, it's a great bet. So those, I always say that the sharp bettors can really make some money early in the season in college hockey.
Yeah, they still have a lot to figure out and not a lot of data to go off of. Even the NHL with free agency and trades, there's a lot more stability than there is these days in college hockey between graduations and the transfer portal. All right. Why don't we dig in now? First, I'll say that if you go to DraftKings, you may not see all these games listed depending on where you live. Jim and Dan are in Massachusetts. No teams from Massachusetts are listed for them when they go to DraftKings. Same for me in New York State. Any of the 11 New York State teams will not be listed. I logged in the VPN, pretended I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I got to see all these games. Your mileage may vary. Let's start out. This one has a big home underdog, so I know Dan will love this one. Michigan goes to Arizona State to Mullet Arena for a pair of games. Michigan is minus 188. Arizona State is plus 145. The over-under on this game on Friday is 6.5.
This is one of those interesting trips for Michigan to have to go down to play in Mullet Arena, which will be sold out. And I believe they're doing a double header with football on Friday, which you don't usually see many schools, especially a school with 85,000 students in their student body, decide to play a hockey game and then a football game hours apart on the same day. But I think this is an interesting one. I do actually think that this is only Friday night's odds that we're looking at. I honestly think that Arizona could win one of these two games. I don't know which one is the game that they would win, which makes the gambling on it a little bit more precarious. But you're looking at such a wide number on the first game, being a plus 145 home underdog. I know Michigan is a nationally ranked team. Arizona State, after falling to Air Force last week, not. But I think that, honestly, this is a great one in terms of getting some value on it. That 145 to me, plus 145 is a great number to get in college hockey. You don't see it enough. I think that Arizona State, they're going to win one of these two games. Again, I'm not telling you which one because I don't know myself. But I think that's one that might be ripe for the picking.
Yeah, I agree. Ed brings up a point, which I come back to over the course of the whole year, if you're new to this, which is that I positively despise whenever a team looks like a significant, or in a matchup where you don't know what you're going to get, when you look and you see a home underdog. To me, that takes apart or picks apart one of the things that makes college hockey so great, which is home ice advantage. And if you look at particular teams over the course of their history, their geographic outliers, or the fact that they have unique geographic situations, like the teams in Colorado with their altitude and some of the things that teams don't have to deal with on a regular basis. A team like Michigan does not frequently go to Arizona to play a hockey game. Their geographic footprint is where it is, and they'll play games around that. But even their non-conference games, if you look back over history, it's very different for a team like Michigan to go to Arizona State, where if you look at last year's home record, Arizona State was very good. They played a lot of their games at home. They were 19-5-4. They won 19 of their 24 games at home, as opposed to, I think, only 10 games that they even played on the roads. A lot more teams have been.
That was the craziest schedule, by the way, I've ever seen designed. But that was Greg Powers in his final independent year. Maybe he played as much as he could at home.
Exactly. And now that they have the conference schedule and there's guarantees on either end of home and road games, you have to look at how much you believe in how Arizona State played at home. And that comes back to quality of the opponent and everything else. Right? You also have to look at how well Michigan played on the road last year and wonder if that's going to carry over with roster changes. And that's if you're in tune to research and to look at the stats and the numbers. So Arizona State at plus 145 is a lot of value on a home team because they're a team that does play exceptionally well at home against a team that doesn't have to usually make that trip, which there are different components to that. If you're from Michigan and you're going out to the desert, might not make that big of a deal in basketball or football, but in hockey, you're not as frequently doing it, especially to an arena like Mullet, which up until this year was doubling as an NHL building with great fan support.
It's a great facility too to play in. Crowd right on top of you. The atmosphere is going to be unbelievable. Right.
Yeah, this is a payback game for all that entire 2020, 2021 season where Arizona played every single game on the road against Big Ten opponents during COVID. So there's something about this. I just like Arizona. I'd probably take them both nights and hope to. Yeah, you might end up middling on it and not making as much money, but I don't think that they're going to sweep. If they win Friday, I'd bet against them on Saturday when the numbers come back out. But I don't mind taking Arizona State here. And the over-under at 6.5, I wouldn't touch that. That is a perfect number. This feels like a 5-2, 4-3 type game. I think that maybe the over hits, but you could easily go under with this 4-2. I hate 6.5. Dan, that's my least favorite number on an over/under. That's one I stay away from. But I like Arizona State on the money line right here.
One thing that would make me tilt a little bit toward Arizona State, after watching them over these several years, they're very aggressive on the penalty kill. That paid off for them on Friday last week. Against Air Force, they had 3 shorthanded goals in their first 4 penalty kills.
It's a crazy stat,
isn't it?
That is a crazy stat. I'm sure that Frank Serratori wasn't very happy with that one.
In fact, what he said was, as a young team, we're going to make mistakes. We can't make nuclear mistakes.
That was nuclear. But talking with Greg Powers a little bit today, you and I interviewed him, Ed, this morning, and he said, I loved 5.5 periods of our hockey last week. But I think and you brought it up, Dan, the altitude started getting to his team late in that game I believe they played Friday, Saturday. And the Saturday game was when they lost a late lead and fell in overtime. But yeah, I think that this is one of those series that it's safe to take Arizona State. You might lose your money, but I don't mind the Sun Devils in this one.
Let's take a look at one more matchup before the break that has 2 really top flight teams. BC, last year's runner-up, and Michigan State, a team ready to take one more step in their pursuance of a national championship. Boston College is minus 135. Michigan State at home is plus 105. And the over-under on this one is also 6.5.
Is it crazy that a team like Michigan State can be a home dog? I know Boston College is great. They're a very solid team. They bring back a good part of that national championship team, national runner-up team from a year ago. But man, again, we're going back to this home dog thing, Dan. I love home dogs. You do. We're both in. That's always our MO, especially early in the season. It's not a ton of value at plus 105, but at least you're getting some plus value from a good Michigan State team at home.
One of the things about Boston College is what they're going to look like this year, because we know they're going to look like something different. Now, last year, BC had a lot of preseason expectations. I think they went from unranked to 8th in the preseason poll. They ended the season before with 20 losses and then opened up Notre Dame football style in the top 5. So people were in love with BC from the very beginning. And then they overshot those expectations when they became number 1 and stayed at number 1. Even when they lost the Beanpot into the postseason, they won the Hockey East Championship. There was a time period where BC had such a strong resume that they could have lost directly out in the playoffs and it wouldn't have made a difference. They were going to be they were 2 weeks left in the regular season. they were the number one team, regardless of what happened down the stretch in terms of the pairwise rankings and things that we'll talk about over the course of the year. Now they're coming in with a team that loses its two best scorers against the expectations that they have brought back so much that somehow they are more expectations than last year's team. Last year was, we'll see what happens with the young guys and see how they can mesh things together. And when they did, it was beautiful. Now they're a team that is almost expected to be in St. Louis at the end of the year. So they're not going to creep up on Michigan State, who is a very good team. Whether or not that means Adam Nightingale is going to have his team to win, that's where you're making your pick against the money line. But again, plus 105 might be just enough for you to say, hey, Michigan State, I think they're going to win. And it's just a little bit to tip it over. I positively hate the over-under here at 6.5 anyway, because I think these two teams, you have teams that can score. That doesn't mean the first weekend of the season they're going to do it. There's so much uncertainty at the beginning of the year. They were playing this game in January. Maybe I'd look at it and say, I can absolutely see a 4-3 game here, but first 2 weeks of the season doesn't feel like anything I want to touch the overs on.
Although last season, early on, we saw a lot of overs win. We saw a lot of scoring early on last season in October and November.
That was so weird.
Yeah, I think that's half the reason the AI is generating big numbers this week on over-unders. This time last year, we were seeing 5s. And I think we only have a couple of 5.5s in our over-unders this year. I don't like the number 6.5. I never do. But I would stay away from this one in spades.
The one thing just to talk about with Michigan State is that this is a very young Michigan State team. They are not top heavy at all towards an older lineup. And BC is always young. So figuring out how you want to approach a young team is part of it when you have guys who maybe haven't seen the same amount of ice time as guys like from BC. That's where it's going to tilt in the AI is how much guys have played versus one another, but you also have to understand that Michigan State has a lot of talent on that roster.
We've got 3 more East-West matchups to look at when USCHO Edge continues. Welcome back to USCHO Edge. Omaha is at UMass. The Mavericks are minus 105. UMass at home is minus 125. Over-under on this one is 5.5.
So pick them. That's all that the sports books are telling us. Pick them. We're going to take some juice from you no matter what, because both teams are negative money here. I don't love the game. We'll talk about it, obviously. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game that this has the makings of it. But then I look at UMass last week. I know it was Bentley. It's a different opponent. They scored in bunches and gave up goals in bunches. So I'm concerned early in the season. My point here is that I like the over here and the over 5.5. It's probably the lowest one. I think it is the lowest one we'll have this week, over 5.5. There's value there for going over at minus 120. But minus 105, minus 125, I don't like either of these two teams. When I really have to come down to it, I wouldn't make a bet on this game. UMass at home has typically been a pretty good first month of the season team at home in recent years. I know that they did drop 2 a couple of years ago right after their national championship, but I think that they'll be a competitive team. Omaha, certainly a better team this year than they were in the last few years. I think that they'll be a really tough opponent, but I'm not with these numbers at minus 105 on Omaha and minus 125 on UMass. I wouldn't be touching this game.
Yeah, there's too much risk involved on them right now, and this game actually is going to be at the Icebreaker out in Las Vegas. So even though UMass is the home team, it's going to be out in Las Vegas, which actually might help them in a sense that if they were playing this on Friday early or Friday night at home or around the weekend, they have a fairly significant football game this weekend at UMass where a nationally ranked Missouri team's coming in. So it would have, I think, negated some of the home ice, for lack of a better term, because there's a bigger event for people to get ready for on campus. Now, that said, UMass, when they're heading away and you're heading out to Las Vegas to play Omaha and you're playing in that Icebreaker tournament, you throw some of the things out the window. And what I mean by that is the fact that Omaha was very good away from their building last year, just in general. They were a good away team. UMass was so-so away from their building last year, but it's neutral ice, so you're not getting the same home ice advantage situation. UMass is flawed. Omaha is flawed coming off of last season. I think if you go back, if you actually watch the UMass game, I watched it. I was there. I was all of the game for Bentley. The UMass team just seemed like they lost their edge. They didn't have it in the third period in particular. And that's a problem because you can get away with that when you have a 5-1 lead after two. I don't think they're going to have a 5-1 lead after two against an Omaha team that's, returning from a 20-win season. So I don't like it. I don't like the line. I don't like there's so much here that's just so much that we just don't know, where we don't know anything about UMass, what they could be against a power conference team versus a good Atlantic hockey team. And we don't know what Omaha is going to be either.
Do you mind over under here, though, at 5.5?
I don't hate it. I think this could go over. I actually do think this could go over because I think UMass cannot possibly have that happen again. But at the same time, UMass defensively, when you look at what they replaced last year and what they have on offense in their system, and I'm speaking more from having one, seeing them, and two, being just familiar with Hockey East, more familiar with Hockey East being in Massachusetts. Here's the one thing I will say about UMass. Last week, so they lost their top two defensemen from last year. They lost their top 2 point scorers, guys on power play, Moro and Ufko. They lost borderline their heart and soul of the offense on the defensive side. And that has a spillover effect. And they've retooled, retinkered, reconfigured things, got to transfer in their defense, specifically to correct some of the woes. And with their offense, which can score up front, you're looking at a team that can settle into the neutral zone, break you up as you come out. It's not a trap or anything like that, but they know how to break you up and turn it back into offense. They do a really good job of counterattacking. So that's going to be able to score a couple of goals. But by the same token, while they're figuring it out in front of a goalie who didn't necessarily think gave the best overall skill set. No, it doesn't mean the best skill set in the room. I just felt like he was giving up too many. Can't remember his name, of course. Off the top of my
Michael Rubin.
Yeah, Michael Rubin. Giving up some rebounds against a team like Omaha, they're probably putting those back in. So I think over 5.5 plays here. And because I can see this being a 3-3 game, which then sends us into overtime or anything like that when they're in the icebreaker.
I do think that Harabal is a better goaltender than he showed, especially in the third period last Saturday. But I like UMass in their transition game. They got up ice fast, especially in the second period. They got woken up in that. Once the game was tied at 1, they looked like a different team and suddenly had a little bit more urgency. Now I think they need that for 60 minutes, not 20, like they did against Bentley. So that'll be a big part of it. Omaha, though, there's plenty of talent there. So I like goals in this game. I do. I think this is maybe a 5-3 game.
Minnesota Duluth heads east to take on UMass Lowell at the Tsongas Center. Minnesota Duluth is -195. UMass Lowell is 150. Over under on this one is 5.5. UMass Lowell is coming off a very tough injury-ridden season last year.
And that's why I think this line might be a little off. They're not going into this game missing 11 players. They were most of the season last year. I actually think Lowell at home could be a pretty dangerous team. They ended up putting up 6 in an exhibition game against Bentley last Sunday. I don't mind the fact that this offense will find ways to get to the net, do a little bit more than they did. Lee Parks, I think is his name, rookie, one of the higher touted rookies in this year's recruiting class across college hockey. I talked to Scott Sandlin yesterday, and he has some good thoughts about his team right now. And again, very similar to Lowell, not as injured. He'd like to come in healthy. I think he's actually still has some guys that are a little bit banged up, but I think that this line is off. I think Lowell at home should not be this big of a dog. So I guess that's just where I'd bet this. I don't know that Lowell will win this game. Home openers, I think under Norm Bay's in, they're pretty much right around 500. So it's not like we can say that they have this big streak or something like that going. But I do think that the value of the bet is there to make some sort of a wager on UMass Lowell getting plus 150. I think there's plenty of value there.
I think there's tons of value on Lowell and being a home underdog. Again, home underdogs to me are fickle, but at the same time, I hate seeing teams at home in certain matchups when people, the AI said, or bookmakers, or when things start getting smart, just say, oh no, they're going to lose. And Duluth was not good on the road last year. They were a bad road team, and they'll be the first ones to admit it. They also lost 2 games at Cornell, and I think those were the first 2 times they played east of their whole footprint since COVID. So this is since the era before COVID. So this is not a team that comes east very often, and they're coming east to play a team that has a pretty good reputation of playing at home. I think Lowell's season last year was difficult for a number of reasons. There's no way to look at it.
Honestly, you just have to throw it away. And honestly, I don't mind doing that with Duluth too. They suffered some massive injuries. There's a number of teams out there that I don't mind just taking the whole season and saying, yeah, don't use that as a reference point.
But even if you were to take certain pieces of it, and I know you can look at it and say they lost at home. They were dragged to a shootout by Holy Cross, and I think they lost that Lowell last year. Or they got blown out at home by Providence and BC and struggled to beat Vermonters. But they also beat Northeastern, who at a time when Northeastern could not lose that game last year. And that was a good Northeastern team that was essentially wiped out badly at home by a Lowell team that was playing hungry and had figured for one night, had figured it out. And it was home ice, good crowd, all of the above against a team that is not, all right, every Hockey East team is its own rival, but I feel like Northeastern came in off the bean pot and Lowell just punched them in the mouth. And so understanding where these teams are coming from, that's where we get at with value. That doesn't mean Lowell's going to win. It doesn't mean we even think Lowell's going to win. But when you look at the odds and you look at plus 150, you find out that there is a significant amount of value in looking at Lowell in this game. Now, if you don't think they're going to win, then don't bet them. But if you aren't confident in the odds of minus 195 on Duluth, that's long odds to try and win your money back. You have to bet $195 to get your 100 back. That to win 100, that's a lot of money you'd be laying down to try and get. Now the over under in this 5.5, it's a low number that I honestly go back and forth on. I feel like Lowell and Duluth historically teams that would like lower numbers, that would be better with lower numbers. It's just a really low number for a team that I think is going to be better offensively, but I still, again, it's early in the season, so that's why maybe I like the under here.
It's been a while since these 2 teams have played, but I believe the last time they did, it was back-to-back 2-1 decisions. Again, too long, not even the same team, so I don't put too much into that, but just for the record.
That's what I'm picturing in my mind as I think about those games.
2-1, right?
Yeah. Let's look at the last one on our list, and it has AIC at Ohio State. The Yellow Jackets are plus 175. The Buckeyes minus 230. Over under is at 6.
So that's the biggest number we were given this week on both the underdog and the favorite. 230 on Ohio State. No value there. AIC, even at 175, I'm not sure there's a ton of value. I do the over under here. I feel like this is a game that goes over probably more than 50% of the time. Or pushes. That's the other thing too, is that a 6 can push. So I like the over 6. That's the only bet I really love here. I just think that when you're looking at a number of minus 230 for a home Ohio State team, there's nothing there that you're earning. If you just want to make sure that you get your $50 back, throw $115 down on Ohio State and you get your $50. But I don't like this one at all from a money line perspective.
One of the things in this one that I think is skewing the numbers are when you plug in strict statistics and it doesn't take into account some of the human element that you would get in this. So AIC for newcomers to college hockey has been the power team in the Atlantic Hockey America Conference for, gotta be, Ed, what do we say? Going on 10 years at this point?
7 years
six,
anyway.
7 years. Seven's more than
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
So 6, 7 years, this has been one of the top tier teams in Atlantic hockey. Now, last year, they made the championship and didn't and lost the championship game. But this is a team that has gone, that had 1.145 straight championships, gone to the tournament, won games in the tournament. And so when you plug the numbers into the computers and you get the win losses and the goals for, goals against, you're going to get a team that is historically capable of drawing maybe some of these games and winning them. But this is where you need to be able to have watched them to understand that Ohio State at minus 230 is beatable in this situation because, frankly, the Big Ten is a significantly better conference than the Atlantic Hockey America Conference. But that's what's all skewing the numbers, is that when you look at the numbers, and I'm saying it backwards, the numbers are skewing for Ohio State because of all of these reasons that you'll hear in college hockey. But if you've watched AIC, you can find some value in a team that is not afraid to go on the road, is historically much older than a Big Ten team because they're playing with older players who come through the international pipeline. They play in the American college hockey. You're getting guys who are 21, 22 years old. They can go out and beat a team like Ohio State, and that's where the value comes from. That is where, in my mind, there's value.
Two things to add to that. One, we talked about Lowell being hurt last year. There was a stretch of about 6 weeks or so with AIC where they had up to 11 players out. Also, the other thing to remember with AIC is there's a lot of turnover year to year. Their head coach, Eric Lang, really likes to use the transfer portal, and I think they've got 7 or 8 transfers in this year. He's been playing both head coach and GM for quite a while to put together this string of success. I don't know that AIC wins that game, but those odds seem pretty wide to me.
I would take the money on the potential money on AIC here. That's what I really like here is the potential money.
Yeah, this is what we refer to as our pizza money bet. If you've got $20 in pizza money that you don't mind throwing away and you just don't want to order pizza that night, and I'd throw it down on AIC because this is the odds being squared is more of a punch at an Atlantic hockey team than if you actually start breaking down how good AIC has been in playing these situations over the past few years.
And by the way, you want to talk pizza money. I know Ed was supposed to cut this at 5 games. Ferris State, a plus 450 underdog against on the road at Western Michigan. That is pizza money right there. That's throw $10 down on that. Hope that it comes through and you win your $50 or something like that on a $10 bet. That's where my pizza money would go this week. I'm going to eat pizza though. I really do love pizza.
You just added a new feature to the show. I think each week we'll find a pizza money bet to add to our 5 that we look at. But we've pretty much run out our time. For Jim Connelly, for Dan Rubin, I'm Ed Trefzger. This has been USCHO Edge.